The rain fell softly on Seattle's busy streets as Zorax adjusted her environmental suit for the third time that morning. Her slender fingers, visible through the translucent material of her gloves, trembled slightly as she checked the oxygen levels. The suit's quiet beeping reminded her that she had exactly 29 days, 14 hours, and 23 minutes left to live. She hadn't told her family she was coming to Earth. They would have stopped her, insisted she spend her final days in the comfort of their advanced medical facilities on Centauri Prime. But Zorax was tired of sterile rooms and pitying looks. If she had to die from this genetic disorder that was slowly shutting down her organs, she wanted her last views to be of the most fascinating species in the galaxy, humans. The Pike Place market buzzed with life around her. Humans of all shapes and sizes moved past her environmental suit without a second glance. Earth was one of the few places in the galaxy where aliens had become common enough that nobody stared anymore. Vendors called out their wares, the smell of fresh fish and flowers mixing in the air. Through her suit's filters, everything smelled clinical and clean, but she could imagine the riot of scents that made her people avoid this primitive world. A warning light flashed in her helmet display. The suit's atmospheric processor was struggling with the high humidity. Zorax ducked under an awning, her three-fingered hand fumbling with the control panel on her wrist. The genetic disorder was affecting her fine motor control now. Another sign that the end was approaching. "Hey, you okay there?" She looked up to see a human male watching her with concern. He was carrying what appeared to be a heavy bag of electronic equipment, his dark hair slightly wet from the rain. A badge on his jacket read, "Chen Biomedical Research." "I am functional," Zorax replied in careful English, using the translation matrix built into her suit. "The environmental controls are merely." The suit chose that moment to hiccup, and suddenly the filtered air supply cut off. Zorax felt her lungs seize as they tried to process Earth's oxygen-nitrogen mix. She stumbled, her vision blurring. The human moved faster than she expected. He caught her before she fell, somehow managing not to drop his bag. "Whoa, that doesn't look functional to me. Here, let me help. I work with environmental systems all the time." "The suit is Centaurian technology," she tried to warn him between gasps. "Your primitive tools won't." But he was already examining the control panel, his eyes scanning the alien readouts with surprising speed. Atmospheric processors got a blocked filter. "Simple fix, if you don't mind me." His fingers moved quickly, bypassing her suit's safety protocols with ease. The air supply hummed back to life. Zorax took a deep breath, feeling her double lungs expand properly again. "Thank you," she said, genuinely surprised. "How did you know how to fix Centaurian technology?" He grinned, running a hand through his wet hair. "Mike Chen. I study alien medical tech for a living. Your environmental suits are actually pretty similar to the cleanroom systems we use in our labs. Just, more elegant." Zorax felt an odd flutter in her failing heart. This human had just casually solved a problem that would have sent her running to a Centaurian tech specialist. Perhaps there was more to these primitives than her people thought. "I'm Zorax," she said, making the formal greeting gesture through her suit. "And I have 29 days to learn everything interesting about your species before I die." Mike Chen's smile faded, but his eyes lit up with a very human determination. "Well then," he said, "we better not waste any time." Mike Chen's laboratory wasn't what Zorax expected from a primitive world. Instead of crude metal tools and smoking machines, the room was filled with elegant holographic displays and humming equipment. She sat in a specially adjusted chair while Mike examined the medical readouts from her suit. "Your condition," he said, frowning at the numbers floating in the air. "It's attacking your cellular structure at a quantum level." He pushed his coffee cup aside, completely focused on the data. "But I don't understand why Centaurian medicine can't fix this. You guys are supposed to be centuries ahead of us." Zorax felt the familiar ache in her joints as she shifted position. "Our medical science is based on perfection," she explained. "When something is broken, we replace it entirely. But my condition..." She paused, searching for simple words. It spreads too fast. By the time they replace one organ, 3 more are failing. Mike scratched his chin, where a day's worth of stubble was growing. He'd canceled all his other work to study her case, something that both touched and confused her. On her world, no scientist would waste time on a dying patient. You know what this reminds me of? He pulled up an old research paper on his holographic display. There was this treatment from 200 years ago, before we had modern medicine. Doctors used to work with the body's natural healing systems instead of trying to replace everything. Zorax leaned forward, her suit creaking. Like the ancient healers of my world. Her translator struggled to keep up with her excitement. Before the great scientific revolution, our doctors did the same. But those methods were abandoned as primitive. Mike's eyes lit up. Primitive doesn't always mean wrong. Look here. He pointed to a diagram showing tiny machines floating in a bloodstream. These are my nanobots. Instead of replacing damaged cells, they help the body repair itself. Everyone said it was a step backward, that full organ replacement was better. But in some cases, the old ways work better. Zorax finished. She felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. A warning beep from her suit interrupted them. Time for her daily medicine. She pressed a button, and clear liquid flowed through tubes into her bloodstream. Mike watched with intense interest. Your medicine, he said slowly. It's fighting the symptoms, not the cause. What if? He jumped up and began pacing. Something Zorax had learned was a very human habit when thinking hard. What if we combined approaches? Use my nanobots to support your body's natural healing, while using your advanced medicine to slow the damage. That would never work, Zorax said automatically, then stopped. Would it? The ancient healers believed in balance, in working with nature instead of against it. Mike grabbed his tablet, fingers flying over the surface. It's crazy enough to try. Look, your people abandoned these methods because they found better ones. But sometimes the best solution isn't the newest one. Sometimes it's about finding the right combination of old and new. Zorax watched him work, noticing how his face got more animated as he solved problems. On her world, scientists were cool and distant, but Mike's passion was infectious. She found herself sharing his excitement, even though she knew she shouldn't get her hopes up. The Centaurian Medical Council will never approve this, she warned. They'll say it's too dangerous, too experimental. Mike looked up, and his smile had a touch of what humans called mischief. Good thing we're on Earth then. Here, we believe in second chances and crazy ideas. For the first time since her diagnosis, Zorax felt like her numbered days might not be so numbered after all. This is madness. The holographic image of Chief Medical Officer Valon filled Mike's lab with angry blue light. You want to inject experimental human technology into a Centaurian patient. The risk is too high. Mike stood his ground, one hand resting protectively on Zorax's environmental suit. Over the past week, her condition had gotten worse. The blue patterns under her skin, visible through her suit, were growing darker, a sure sign of spreading damage. With all respect, Mike said, trying to keep his voice calm, Zorax is going to die in 22 days if we do nothing. My nanobots have been programmed with Centaurian biology. We've run 50 simulations. Simulations. Valon's 3-fingered hand cut through the air. This is why humans are considered primitive. You would risk a patient's life on computer games. Zorax pushed herself up from her chair, her legs shaking slightly. Chief Valon, the ancient healers. Do not speak to me of those outdated practices. Valon's image flickered with his anger. We abandoned such methods centuries ago. Our way is pure. When something is broken, we replace it. We do not tinker. Mike felt his patience snap. He stepped forward, through Valon's hologram, breaking the connection. The lab fell silent except for the soft beeping of Zorax's medical monitors. I'm sorry, he said, turning to her. I thought if we showed them the data. Zorax touched his arm, her 3 fingers gentle through the suit's material. My people fear what they don't understand, and they don't understand humans at all. She paused, looking at the scattered tablets showing their research. But I do. I've watched you work this past week. You don't give up. You try new things. When something fails, you learn from it instead of dismissing it. Mike walked to his main workstation, where a vial of silvery liquid gleamed under the lights. His nanobots, programmed with everything he knew about Centaurian biology, combined with traces of the ancient healer's remedies that Zorax had helped him reproduce. The simulations are positive, he said softly. The nanobots don't try to rebuild your cells like your people's methods. They support your body's natural healing process, like the ancient healers did, but at a molecular level. He picked up the vial. But Vylon is right about one thing. It's never been tested on a real patient. Xerax's vital signs beeped steadily in the background as she considered. Finally, she spoke. On my world, we have a saying. The surest path isn't always the best one. Our medicine is built on certainty. Every treatment is tested for decades before approval. She straightened up, her voice growing stronger. But I don't have decades. I have 22 days, and I choose to trust human ingenuity. Mike carefully loaded the vial into a medical injector. Once we do this, there's no going back. The Centaurian Medical Council might ban you from returning home. Xerax's laugh was weak but genuine. I'm not supposed to have a home for much longer anyway. She extended her arm, letting Mike connect the injector to her suit's medical port. Besides, Earth is starting to feel more like home than Centauri ever did. Mike's hands were steady as he prepared the injection, but his heart was racing. Everything he'd worked for, everything he believed about combining old wisdom with new technology, came down to this moment. Ready? He asked. Xerax nodded. Let's show the galaxy what happens when human creativity meets Centaurian tradition. Mike pressed the button, and the silver liquid began to flow. The first 3 days after the injection were hopeful. Xerax's vital signs improved slightly, and the dark blue patterns under her skin began to fade. Mike barely left the lab, monitoring every change, adjusting the nanobot's programming as needed. He slept on a cot next to her medical pod, waking every hour to check the readings. But on the 4th day, everything went wrong. Mike. Xerax's voice was barely a whisper. Something's not right. Her environmental suit's displays were flashing red, numbers dropping rapidly. Mike rushed to her side, his tablet already pulling up her medical data. What he saw made his blood run cold. The nanobots were working as designed, helping her body heal itself, but the process was consuming energy faster than her systems could handle. No, he muttered, fingers flying over the controls. This isn't supposed to happen. The simulations never showed this kind of power drain. Xerax tried to reach for him, but her arm fell back weakly. It's okay, she said softly. You tried. That's more than my people would have done. Don't talk like that. Mike's voice was fierce. I'm not giving up. The lab door burst open. 2 Centaurian medical officers in formal suits strode in, followed by human security guards. Step away from the patient, the lead Centaurian ordered. By order of the Medical Council, this unauthorized experiment is terminated. Mike moved between them and Xerax. You can't stop the treatment now. Her systems are too unstable, which is exactly why we're here. The officer's voice was cold. This primitive interference has gone too far. We're taking her back to Centauri Prime for proper care. She'll never survive the journey. Mike showed them his tablet. Look at these readings. Her body is in the middle of a complete cellular reconstruction. Moving her now would. A harsh alarm cut through the argument. Xerax's vital signs were crashing. Mike, she gasped. The patterns on her skin were turning black. Can't breathe. The Centaurian officers pushed forward with their equipment, but Mike was already moving. He'd spent the last week preparing for every possible emergency. His hands flew over the lab controls, activating protocols he'd hoped he'd never need. "Get out of my way," he growled at the officers. "Unless you want to explain to your council how you let a patient die while arguing about regulations." Something in his voice made them step back. Maybe it was the raw determination, or maybe they saw what he saw in the medical readings. Zorax had minutes, maybe seconds, left. Mike grabbed a second vial of nanobots, these ones modified with an emergency protocol he'd developed late one sleepless night. It was untested, dangerous, and probably illegal on both Earth and Centauri Prime. It was also her only chance. "Zorax," he said, connecting the vial to her suit. "This is going to hurt. The nanobots will supercharge your body's healing process. Every cell will feel like it's on fire. But I need you to hold on. Can you do that?" She couldn't speak anymore, but her hand found his and squeezed weakly. The Centaurian officers were shouting something about protocols and regulations. The human security guards looked unsure whether to intervene. Mike ignored them all. "Sometimes," he said, remembering Zorax's words about the ancient healers, "healing has to hurt before it helps." He injected the nanobots and grabbed her hand tight, watching as the black patterns on her skin began to glow. Zorax screamed. For 3 days, Zorax burned with fever. The glowing patterns under her skin pulsed like stars going supernova, bright enough to cast shadows on the lab walls. Mike never left her side, even when the Centaurian officers threatened to arrest him. He kept working, adjusting the nanobot's programming, monitoring every flutter of her vital signs. On the 4th day, the screaming stopped. On the 5th day, she opened her eyes. "You look terrible," were her first words to Mike, her voice rough but stronger than it had been in weeks. Through her environmental suit's faceplate, she could see the dark circles under his eyes, the week's worth of stubble on his chin. "You should see yourself," he replied with a tired smile, checking her vital signs for the 1000th time. "How do you feel?" Zorax moved carefully, testing each limb. The burning sensation was gone. The patterns on her skin had faded to a healthy pale blue. "I feel alive." She sounded surprised. "More than alive. I feel strong." Mike slumped in his chair, relief making him dizzy. The emergency protocol had worked better than he'd dared hope. The supercharged nanobots had accelerated her natural healing ability to unprecedented levels, rebuilding damaged tissue faster than the genetic disorder could destroy it. "The medical council is going crazy trying to understand the readings," he told her, gesturing at the dozens of messages flooding his screens. "Your body didn't just fight off the disorder. It rewrote the damaged genes. According to their tests, you're not just cured. You're healthier than before you got sick." "How?" Zorax sat up, marveling at how easy it felt. "This shouldn't be possible. Even our most advanced genetic treatments can't rewrite DNA at this level." Mike pulled up a holographic display showing the nanobots' work. "That's because your doctors try to force the body to change. These nanobots," he highlighted a section of the display, "they worked with your natural healing processes, like the ancient healers did. They just sped everything up about 1,000,000 times." The lab door chimed, and Chief Medical Officer Valon walked in. This time he was there in person, not as a hologram. His formal suit looked wrinkled, as if he'd traveled straight from Centauri Prime without resting. "The council has reviewed the data," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "We've never seen anything like this. Combining primitive human technology with ancient medical practices should not have worked. And yet," he gestured at Zorax, "you have accomplished something our best scientists thought impossible." Mike stood up, ready to defend their work again, but Valon raised a hand. "We are not here to stop you," he said. "We are here to learn. Already, we have received requests from 50 other patients with similar genetic disorders. They all want to know if this human approach could help them too." Zorax looked at Mike, then back at Valon. "You mean?" Valon nodded. "The council is prepared to establish a joint research program, human innovation combined with Centaurian knowledge. if you are both willing to lead it. Mike felt Zorax's hand slip into his. Through the suit's material, he could feel the strength in her grip. Just days ago, she'd been counting down her final hours. Now she was making history. "What do you think?" he asked her, ready to revolutionize medicine across two worlds. Zorax's laugh was strong and clear, nothing like the weak whisper it had been before. "Well," she said, "I suddenly have a lot more time to spare." The new Human Centaurian Medical Center occupied an entire floor of Seattle's tallest building. 3 months after Zorax's recovery, patients from across the galaxy filled its waiting rooms. Through the large windows, Earth's sunset painted the sky in colors that reminded Zorax of home. "Another successful treatment," Mike announced, walking into their shared office. He held up a tablet showing the latest patient's results. "Third case this week where the nanobots completely reversed genetic damage." Zorax looked up from her own work, where she was teaching the nanobots to recognize different alien physiologies. She no longer needed her environmental suit. Her strengthened immune system could handle Earth's atmosphere. The patterns on her skin glowed with healthy blue light. "The Andromean patient?" she asked. "The one everyone said was too different from Centaurian biology." Mike grinned, dropping into the chair next to her. "Turns out bodies aren't so different when you work with them instead of trying to rebuild them from scratch. The ancient healers were right all along. Living things want to be healthy. They just need the right kind of help." A soft chime announced another visitor. Dr. Sarah Chen, Mike's sister and the center's chief of research, rushed in with excitement on her face. "You need to see this," she said, bringing up a holographic display. "Remember how we thought the nanobots only worked on genetic disorders? Look at these results from the trauma ward." The display showed a Rigelian worker who'd been badly injured in a mining accident. The nanobots had helped heal injuries that would normally take months to recover from in just days. "It makes sense," Zorax said, studying the data. "The ancient healers didn't just treat diseases. They understood that all healing comes from within. The nanobots just remind the body of what it already knows how to do." Mike watched her with pride. In 3 months, she'd gone from a dying patient to one of the most respected medical researchers in 2 civilizations. Her understanding of both advanced Centaurian science and ancient healing arts made her uniquely qualified to bridge the gap between worlds. "The medical council sent another message," he told her. "They want to open 5 more centers like this one, not just on Earth and Centauri Prime, but on other worlds too." Zorax smiled, remembering how those same council members had once called their work primitive and dangerous. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them we'd help, on one condition." Mike pulled up another file. "Every center has to include a library of ancient healing texts, and every doctor has to study both new and old methods. No more dismissing ideas just because they're not the latest technology." A commotion in the hallway drew their attention. A group of young doctors, human and alien mixed together, were excitedly discussing a case. Through the open door, Zorax could hear them debating the merits of combining traditional healing practices with modern tools. "Look at them," she said softly. "When I came to Earth, I thought I was choosing a place to die. Instead, I found a whole new way to help people live." Mike took her hand, his fingers intertwining with her 3. "You know what the best part is? Every patient we treat goes home with a story about how humans and their primitive ideas helped solve an impossible problem. We're not just changing medicine, we're changing how species see each other." Zorax squeezed his hand. "Speaking of changing things," she pulled up a private file on her tablet. "I've been working on adapting the nanobots for cross-species genetic compatibility, just in case certain humans and Centaurians wanted to think about a more permanent partnership." Mike's eyes widened as he realized what she meant. Outside, the sun set on another day of impossible things becoming possible. 1 year to the day since Zorax had first collapsed in Pike Place Market, she stood on the observation deck of the Space Needle with Mike. Seattle spread out below them, its lights twinkling like stars. But the real spectacle was above. Ships from a dozen different worlds hung in the evening sky, bringing patients and doctors to the now famous human Centaurian medical centers. Hard to believe this all started with a broken environmental suit, Mike said, his arm around her waist. The genetic modifications they'd developed had worked perfectly. Their bodies were now compatible enough to touch without protection. Zerax leaned against him, her skin patterns glowing softly in the dim light. I was supposed to have 29 days left to live. Instead, I got a whole new life. She touched the ring on her finger, a blend of Earth diamonds and Centaurian crystals, given to her just that morning. Their private moment was interrupted by a gentle chime from their communicators. Dr. Sarah Chen's hologram appeared, looking excited. "You both need to see this," she said. "The Arcturian High Council just released their medical data. 1,000 years of genetic research, freely shared. They say if humans can teach Centaurians new tricks, maybe they can learn something too." Mike laughed. "Remember when they called us dangerous primitives? Now everyone wants to know the human secret to healing." "But that's just it," Zerax said thoughtfully. "There is no secret. You humans just never forgot something my people did. That healing isn't about forcing change. It's about helping life do what it naturally wants to do." Below them, a group of medical students, human, Centaurian, and 3 other species, walked out of the Human Centaurian Medical Center. They were arguing passionately about combining Earth's primitive healing arts with advanced alien technology. 10 new centers opening next month, Mike said. One on every major world that would host us. And every single one will have both ancient and modern knowledge in their libraries. Zerax smiled, remembering her own prejudices when she'd first arrived. "We thought we were so advanced, with our genetic engineering and full-body replacements. But you humans taught us that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. They just need a little modern help." A shooting star streaked across the sky. Actually, a medical transport ship entering atmosphere. More patients coming to Earth, not because it had the most advanced technology, but because it had something better. People who weren't afraid to try new things, to combine old and new, to work with nature instead of against it. "The Council wants us to head the new research division," Mike said, "exploring other primitive medical techniques from across the galaxy. See what other wisdom we've all forgotten in our rush to be advanced." "And what did you tell them?" "I told them we'd do it. After our honeymoon." He grinned. "I think combining human and Centaurian wedding traditions is going to be our biggest experiment yet." Zerax laughed, a sound that still amazed her. A year ago, she couldn't even breathe without help. Now she was planning a wedding, running a medical revolution, and showing the galaxy that the most advanced civilization wasn't always the one with the fanciest technology. "You know what the best part is," she said, watching another ship descend. "Every patient who comes here leaves with 2 things, a cure and a story about how humans turned out to be wiser than anyone expected." Mike pulled her closer as the stars came out above them. "Not bad for a primitive world, huh?" "No," Zerax said, thinking of all the lives they would save together. "Not bad at all."